Hello everybody and welcome back to the JL Media YouTube channel. My name's Jack and today we've got Premier League podcast episode number 2. We've got some different things to go through and discuss today. I'm going to talk about Bournemouth's remarkable start of the season, as let's call it. I think they've been fantastic, so we'll dive a little bit into that and obviously why I think they've started so well. We're going to talk a little bit about Erling Haaland as well, and his start of the season's been just as incredible in terms of goal scoring records. And then we're also going to touch on Liverpool's recent form, and obviously they've got a big clash coming up at the weekend as well against Manchester United, so we'll have a little preview maybe of that game after Manchester United's win on the weekend. So if you are new around here, please do hit the subscribe button and the like button on the video. It lets us know that you're enjoying the content that we're putting out. Like I say, last week's episode was the first episode of the Premier League podcast, trying to do something different. So yeah, we're here again, and obviously we are now into the international break. And I think England play possibly on Thursday night. Recording this on Wednesday, so yeah, they play tomorrow night. We'll see how they get on as well. But yeah, without further ado, we'll head straight into the video and we'll talk about the first talking point, which is going to be Bournemouth's start of the season. Okay, so starting with Bournemouth's season so far, and obviously I understand we're only 7 games into the season, so it's hard to predict where Bournemouth may end up finishing. We can only go off what we've seen so far and where they currently are, and at this current moment they're sitting in the top 4 and they are the form team at the minute. They have been unbeaten since their only defeat of this season, which was the first game against Liverpool at Anfield, and since then they've managed to remain unbeaten for the next 6 games, and they picked up some really incredible results during that time as well. I think what it comes down to is obviously they've brought in Andoni Iraola, who is a fantastic manager, and he's got Bournemouth playing in a system that really suits them. They play in such a cramped stadium, and the atmosphere, although it's not the biggest of stadiums in the Premier League, the atmosphere sticks when they're playing at home, and that has a big factor in obviously Bournemouth and how they play. And they've remained unbeaten so far at the start of this season at home. They've picked up 3 wins and 1 draw from their 4 games. And obviously they've managed a win and a draw away from home, and obviously the defeat to Liverpool as well. So they're currently sitting on 14 points, and like I say, they are the form team. And when you look at the attacking talent that they've got all over the pitch, not necessarily just the forward players, their full-backs as well. We've seen Milos Kerkez last season for Bournemouth, who's now got his move to Liverpool, was a very advanced full-back and really linked up with Bournemouth's system. And that's how Iraola wants to play. He enjoys everyone being a part of the system, and I think it's quite remarkable that Bournemouth's actually had their whole defence almost ripped apart, essentially. They've all gone Zabani, Huyson, Kerkez, and they've managed to remain as solid as they were last season. Obviously, I love Senesi at the back as well for Bournemouth. I think he's a fantastic defender. He makes a big difference for them. And I also love the midfield as well. I mean, obviously, you've got mentioned Semenyo as well. He's been fantastic at the start of the season, providing the goals for Bournemouth. They've obviously had Kluivert, who was out at the start of the season. It seems like he's coming back into the frame after recovering from his injury. Evan Nilsson is a fantastic forward. They signed him from Porto, the Brazilian lad. He's really good up front, very clinical as well. And yeah, they've just got lots of options, and I think it's always nice when you've got that option to rotate. It allows you to change it up and becomes more unpredictable for other teams when you're playing against them. So honestly, Bournemouth, massive credit to them, massive credit to Andoni Iraola. Last season they had their best finish in the Premier League. They ended up finishing 9th on 56 points, and I mean they could be on to better that this season. They could be on to push on and qualify for European football. I mean, that would be amazing to see Bournemouth. Obviously, when they came up to the Premier League, and I know there was lots of obviously not rumours, but predictions that they were going to go back down. They were looking the weakest of the teams that come up. That's what people were thinking, and they managed to survive in that season and done very well. And obviously since then they've gone from strength to strength, like I say, especially after they've brought in Andoni Iraola. Obviously I don't want to say that he can move on to a different club, but definitely his style of play and what he's trying to build at Bournemouth, it will be looked upon by clubs around Europe. And obviously if there is manager vacancies, then he could be on the list. But I think he obviously enjoys managing Bournemouth, and I think he's enjoying the challenge of trying to build Bournemouth up. And I always say with Bournemouth and teams like Brighton, arguably Crystal Palace this season as well, they tend to sell their players obviously to some clubs that come in for them. Not necessarily bigger clubs, but there is interest in their players, and sometimes they can't keep a hold of them. And the magical thing about these clubs are that they manage to rebuild whilst letting players go. And I don't want to refer to them as a stepping stone of a club, because that's not what they are. But they're able to bring in players relatively unknown to the Premier League and obviously to other teams who aren't scouting them, and to build them up to be, elite players, not necessarily world class, because sometimes when they get the move away, that's when they make the jump to become world class. But they make them elite players that then stand out to the other teams, whether that's in the Premier League or across Europe, different leagues. And that's the model that these teams have, and they've been very sustainable at doing it and consistently keeping up with it every single season. So Bournemouth, like I say, lost their whole defence this season, but they managed to recruit really well and keep as solid as, like I say, as solid as they were last season, if not even more solid. And they've got even more attack and threat. I mean, Semenyo, well, obviously we're going to come on to Haaland obviously later on in the video as well, but Semenyo, to have 6 goals in 7 games at the start of this season, he's firing on all cylinders, and it's not just his goal scoring ability that's helping Bournemouth, it's the creativity as well. It's the ability to, help out the teammates and lay up chances for the other attacking players, as well as taking his own chances when he gets them. And he's obviously signed a long contract with Bournemouth in the summer. There was rumours that he was going to be moving away, possibly. I know there was a couple of Premier League clubs sniffing around him. There was obviously, I think, a 70 million price tag was put on his head, and I think you could possibly, add another 20-30 million to that now after the start of the season that he's had. If he was 70 million from last season, he's definitely worth more than that from what we've seen so far in the opening 7 games. Apologies. So, definitely for me, I think Bournemouth's got a very sustainable squad and a very sustainable system, how they're playing, how they're managing to bring players in and letting players go. And it makes Bournemouth look like a good club as well. That players will want to sign for a club that they know won't stand in their way if they do want to make a step up or move away to a different club. Bournemouth won't restrict them from doing that, and there's evidence of them allowing players to move on when they feel the time is right, which is a massive thing nowadays. We see lots of teams not necessarily holding players hostage, but obviously wanting to keep them for the best of the club, and obviously not wanting to sell them on to a rival team in the Premier League or in a European competition. So for Bournemouth to have that ability to say to players that they can bring them in, they know they're going to develop. Obviously they've got a world-class manager in Andoni Iraola, and they know that if they can get developed, then they can move on possibly at a later time as well. It's fantastic for them. But obviously, talk about the players that are there and the players that are committing to Bournemouth and wanting to stay. That's the most important thing this season for them. I honestly think Bournemouth could be onto something very special. I always respect Bournemouth as a club. I think they're fantastic. And I think it's just remarkable seeing what they're doing at the moment in the Premier League. I'm not saying that they shouldn't have the quality to do that, but I just think, it's always nice to see teams trying to break the mould of the stereotypical teams that would qualify for Europe. And I think we've seen that a lot over the last few seasons as well. We've seen obviously Brighton have a stint in the Europa League. We've seen Aston Villa have a stint in the Champions League. Newcastle are currently in the Champions League. And yeah, I think it's nice to see these clubs who, especially Aston Villa, who once have had European success. We've seen Nottingham Forest as well, who we touched on a little bit last week, and obviously their struggles are continuing as well. But we can save that for another video. But yeah, Nottingham Forest obviously in Europe as well. Crystal Palace are in this season. So some of these teams like Nottingham Forest and Aston Villa, who have had European success in the past, to see them back again and qualifying for the European competitions is a big thing. And Bournemouth have never had that luxury. So I think it would be amazing to see them qualify, even for the Conference League. I think they could have a very good run in that competition as well. We've seen Premier League teams normally tend to do well in that competition. West Ham have won it, Chelsea have won it, so I think there could be a possibility for that. Obviously, you don't want to put too much pressure on Bournemouth, possibly that's not an expectation that would have been set at the start of the season, I imagine. They probably would have been happy with, maybe getting in the top half again like they did last year. They finished in 9th place. So I think that would have been comfortable for Bournemouth and obviously their owners. But definitely from the start of the season, maybe expectations could be slightly changing and they may be looking towards a European finish. Obviously, they have to continue the form up. I know they may have some difficult games coming up as well. But they managed to deal with some of the games they've had already incredibly well. And like I say, even that Liverpool game, they came back to 2-2. And it was, close to the 90th minute when Liverpool went 3-2 up. So even they could have been unbeaten at this point of the season, which is really incredible to think about. But I think it's been a fantastic start. Bournemouth fans, if there's anyone listening from Bournemouth, let me know about your thoughts on this start of the season and how you think Bournemouth will fare up as we get further into the season. And obviously, yeah, like I say, I mean, don't want to put too much on it, but I would love to see personally Bournemouth qualifying for a European competition. I think that would be amazing for them. So yeah, congratulations for the start of the season though. Top 4 at the moment. Only Tottenham, Liverpool and Arsenal ahead of them. That's obviously Tottenham under Thomas Frank. So yeah, it's been a remarkable start of the season. Ahead of Manchester City, who's currently in 5th. So I think it's fantastic for them. I probably repeated myself loads of times in that little segment, but I had to talk about them because I thought, seeing their result at the weekend as well. Obviously they played on Friday night and they went 1-0 down to Fulham, and the ability to turn it round as well. Like I say, I mean, Semenyo was a key figure in that game to be able to get a couple of goals and obviously contribute with an assist as well. Is just fantastic. He's continuing on his form at the start of the season. But another man who's also on top form in front of goal is Manchester City's Erling Haaland, and I don't think it comes as a surprise to anyone that obviously we're seeing these numbers from Erling Haaland. We have seen it in the past from him. You remember when he came in his first season and everybody was a bit unsure on how he was going to do. It was a bit of an unknown quantity from the Bundesliga. Obviously he played at Salzburg before that as well, and Norway where he's from, so there was this element that we didn't really know what to expect from Haaland. We knew that he was a goal-scoring machine in Germany, but how was that going to translate when he come across to the Premier League? Well, he made 37 appearances, 35 starts, 2 appearances off the bench, and he scored 36 goals. He broke the record for a 38-game Premier League season in front of goals. So that was absolutely remarkable from him and from obviously everyone's expectations of what Erling Haaland could bring. He then backed that up the season after with 27 goals, which again is fantastic. Over 25 goals I think is an absolutely remarkable achievement in a 38-game season. Obviously it depends on how many games each player is playing as well, and with Manchester City doing well in cup competitions as well, you would imagine that Haaland was going to be rotated at all times, so he's not necessarily going to be starting all 38 games or even featuring in all 38 games, and to get a return of 36 and 27 goals from his first 2 seasons was remarkable. And then obviously last season Manchester City had a little bit of a fall off. I'm a bit sceptical seeing fall off because they still finished in 3rd place, but I suppose that just shows the standards that they have set. They won the 4 Premier League titles in a row, and to finish 3rd, and obviously I think it was more to do with the performances and the amount of points that they picked up in the season was a little bit lacklustre and below the standard that we've seen from Manchester City that we know they can do, especially under Pep Guardiola. Despite that, Erling Haaland still got 22 goals last season. So every single season out of the 3 that he's been in the Premier League, he's hit more than 20 goals, which is very rare to find in a player these days, to guarantee yourself 20 goals each season. That is sensational. And he started this season off as well. In 7 games, he's got 9 goals. He's nearly halfway to the 20 mark already, and we haven't even reached double figures for games. So honestly, incredible from Erling Haaland. And obviously Manchester City as well are having a fairly good start this season. I just mentioned that they're in 5th place. They had a good victory against Manchester United in the Manchester derby. They obviously got a draw against Arsenal, and most recently they beat Brentford away from home. So that was a tight game. It was a 1-0 victory for Manchester City. Erling Haaland with the single goal in the game to get them the 3 points. And I think for Manchester City, they obviously want to be competing in the title race. I think it's brought it a little bit closer because obviously Arsenal have moved at the top of the table. Liverpool have lost their last 2 league games. So it's becoming increasingly tight at the top, I would say. Manchester City currently sat 3 points behind Arsenal, who are top of the league, so there's no rule of Manchester City out of the title. And I think when you've got Erling Haaland on the form that he's on, anything's possible when you can rely on someone for goals. And it's not just in the Premier League that he's been scoring the goals either. It's obviously the Champions League as well. He's contributed to Manchester City's victory against Napoli. They got a draw away at Monaco as well. So they're starting the season well by their standards, obviously, from last season as well. It seems like a much improved side, and we knew they bought really well in the summer as well, not just Tierney Reinders, but Ryan Shaky, Ryan Ait-Nouri. These are some top players that they managed to bring in. Phil Foden looks like he's back to his best as well, which could be contributing to Erling Haaland's form, obviously. So we know that Manchester City had some injury struggles last year. I mean, Erling Haaland especially was injured for a little period. We know Rodri was out for the length of the season pretty much. And even he's still struggling. I think he come off against Brentford with a muscle injury. Obviously, we'll have to see how that one affects him. Is he going to be out for another lengthy period of time? Because that could affect all performance from Manchester City, not just Haaland. So I think there's things to look out for, especially that. But we can only go off what's in front of us at the moment. And the numbers that Haaland's putting up in front of goal is incredible. And long may it continue, because obviously what you want to see is you want to have a competitive golden boot race. I think that's one of the things I said at the start of the season is, we want to have players competing for the golden boot. We've got lots of top quality Premier League strikers. We have Gyökeres, we have Haaland, we've got Isak, who got his move to Liverpool. And Nick Woltemade started well at Newcastle, the replacement for Isaac. He's got 3 goals as well. So we've got a wealth of top strikers. Obviously Ollie Watkins hasn't really started the season as well as I thought he would do. He had a good season last season, an exceptional season the year before when Aston Villa did qualify for the Champions League. But there's an absolute wealth of top class strikers. Semenyo's the closest to Haaland with 6 goals, so he's 3 behind him. But yeah, I think Erling Haaland's just in an absolute league of his own. From what we've seen at the start of this season, he's a remarkable footballer, and just he's clinical. I think lots of people criticise his game. I mean, I've always been a big fan of Haaland and what he's about. He's a poacher. I think there's no getting away from that. He's always in the right place. He always knows where to put the ball. It's in the back of the net, and I think from his point of view, he doesn't necessarily need to drop deep like we see a lot of strikers do, and he doesn't need to be a creative outlet. Manchester City's got enough creative players in the starting 11 and enough creative players that they can bring off the bench as well to change the game if it's not necessarily going their way. So for me, Erling Haaland is a poacher, and there's nothing wrong with that. Back in the day we used to have a lot of poachers. We used to have a lot of top class strikers competing for the golden boot season in, season out. And I think obviously the way that football's moved on and been played a lot more around all leagues across Europe, not just the Premier League, players in all different types of positions have to be adaptable. Goalkeepers have to be able to play with their feet now. Centre backs have to be able to bring the ball out comfortably. Strikers have to be able to not just score the goals but to create them as well. Football's just turned on its head a little bit. But honestly, if for Haaland, he is in the perfect system for his game style. He's in the right place all the time. He knows how to be clinical. He's perfected his game, and I still think he can get better. There's always things that you can improve on as a footballer, but I think he's near enough as perfect as you can get for a striker. Probably the best striker we've seen in football, obviously in the modern times, definitely would be Cristiano Ronaldo. And his game changed from when he was at Manchester United, when he was a winger, and when he first started his career, and he adapted when he went to Real Madrid. He become more central, and obviously he went to Juventus and come back to Manchester United from Juventus, and we've seen a completely different type of Cristiano Ronaldo in the Premier League that was more of a poacher style player and had success with it, scored plenty of goals for Manchester United. Obviously they didn't end up really finishing where they wanted to in them seasons when he come back, but that is the type of player that Haaland can aspire to be like. He can really, mould his game, not necessarily from Ronaldo, but I think he's got his own style anyway. He just needs to continue doing what he's doing, because everything he's got in his locker is pretty much there for the top class striker. 94 goals in 104 Premier League appearances. That is just sensational. What words can you put to that? I think we haven't seen numbers like that for a long time in the Premier League, and I think obviously we know that Alan Shearer's record in the Premier League is 260 goals. If Erling Haaland, which he signed that long contract at Manchester City, if he does remain and see the rest of his career out in the Premier League, I think we could be looking at a new Premier League goal record. We could have seen it with Harry Kane. He took the option to move to Germany. He felt like he'd done what he needed to do in the Premier League. He'd had some good seasons with Spurs without winning the title and obviously winning a trophy with Spurs. Let's see if Erling Haaland can run Alan Shearer close, because I think he's well on track for it. Looking at that record, appearances to goals, he's absolutely, like I say, in a world of his own. But yeah, obviously Manchester City fans, how do you think the start of the season's gone so far? I personally think that you are doing all right. You're on for a good season, Champions League and Premier League, and then obviously maybe even the Domestic Cup. I mean, could you repeat the treble that was completed in Erling Haaland's first season? It's going to be a big ask. There's only been two English teams to complete the treble: Manchester United in '99 and Manchester City, obviously, in 2023 as well. So it's a big ask. But I think obviously if any team is capable of doing it at the moment, it looks like Manchester City or Arsenal. Let's give Arsenal a mention because they're playing nice football at the moment. But yeah, I think Arsenal's main concern at the minute has got to be to win the Premier League after they've been so close, each time. So yeah, well done to Manchester City so far for the start of the season. Congratulations, Erling Haaland, and fantastic goal scoring so far. Again, let's see if he can continue his form. But I have no doubts about that at all. And what I do have doubts about, or maybe slight doubts about, would be Liverpool's ability to retain the Premier League title this season. And if you had have asked us this a couple of weeks ago, I probably would have said that Liverpool are, the best team in the league and they've, got some good form. But really, Liverpool haven't particularly played well at the start of this season. And Jamie Carragher highlighted it. He said that after the first game when they beat Bournemouth, that he spoke to Arne Slot and said that it felt like a bit of a basketball game. I could be misquoting him there, but I think he said it felt like, watching Liverpool so far this season's been like watching basketball games. It's very end to end. There's not a lot of control to the game. And because the transfer strategy, we talked about this in the last video as well. I don't want to sort of repeat myself, but they've brought in a lot of very, very capable attacking players this season. Ekitike, Isaac, Wirtz. Even as we mentioned right at the start of the video, Kirkes is a very attacking fullback. Frimpong's a very attacking fullback. These players are very, very good going forward. But Liverpool look a little bit lacklustre and a little bit open and exposed when they're going towards their own goal defensively. And lots of teams have been very close to capitalising on that this season. There has been obviously Crystal Palace, who did capitalise on it, and Chelsea with their late winner against Liverpool at the weekend as well on Saturday night. So Liverpool have now lost their last 3 games in all competitions. They got beat off, as we say, Crystal Palace, Galatasaray in the Champions League, and then they got beat off Chelsea just before the international break. And I don't think this international break's come at a bad time for Liverpool, because I think it gives the players a chance to, maybe go away on international duty, or the players that are remaining who are not going away to, come in and train with Arne Slot and figure out exactly what's going wrong this season with them, So for me, I don't necessarily think anything's gone particularly wrong. I just think it's a bad run of results. And I think with Liverpool, obviously they've been playing lots of stoppage time this season, and that will eventually catch up with you over the course of the season. You're going to be playing more minutes than any other team when you're playing, 8 minutes of stoppage time. In a lot of the games at the start of the season, the story was that Liverpool were very good mentally by remaining in the game and winning it late on. Now it sort of could change to they've been playing too many minutes and it's all catching up with them. The players look a little bit tired and maybe they just need a little bit of a rest, a little bit of a break from the Premier League. It's very intense and, it can all catch up with any team at some point. So, it's not a surprise to see Liverpool possibly struggling at this point after they've had, a lot of long games at the start of the season. So I do also think that there's a bit of an issue with the players that they've brought in fitting into the squad. I think they've bought a real gem in Hugo Ekitike, and he was brought in before Alexander Isak was signed. And obviously Liverpool made it clear that Alexander Isak was always a priority, was always one that they wanted to sign this summer. They brought in Wirtz early on, as well as Frimpong Kerkez as well. So these players were all brought in quite early in the window. The only one that wasn't was Alexander Isak. And I think Liverpool's plan was always that Alexander Isak is going to be the first choice striker inevitably, because we've seen his quality before for Newcastle. We know that he is a top class striker and he delivers. I think he scored 20 plus goal seasons for Newcastle, so we know that Liverpool are arguably a better attacking team than Newcastle. I think that's a fact, we could put that out there. And I think he would get more chances at Liverpool when they're firing. He's got Salah providing for him, he's got Wirtz providing for him. We know Gakpo's a fantastic player as well. And even the two midfielders, Gravenberch and McAllister, sensational. Szoboszlai as well. So we know Liverpool have an amazing squad. But for some reason, it's just not worked at the start of the season. I wouldn't say not worked, because obviously they are still sat in second place. They're only a point behind Arsenal. If it wasn't for these last two defeats, then, they would be top. So, yes, I think Liverpool's had in terms of points that they've picked up, they've had a good start of the season. In terms of the performances, there's definitely something not right there when you're watching them. You can tell that something's a little bit off, and it's just hard to put your finger on it. I don't know if I necessarily agree with Carragher that I think it looks like a basketball game. I do think there is elements of control in the game, but I just think that obviously there's something not quite right there, and I do think obviously Liverpool tried to sign Mark Guéhi on deadline day as well. That would have 100% shored the defence up for them, and to miss out on him, is that having an effect on their season? We know Konate is out of contract and could be moving away on a free in the summer, and I know obviously a lot of Liverpool fans maybe think that his head's not in the game, but I think obviously we're nitpicking at little things there, and like I say, I think it could just come down to a bigger picture that Liverpool are maybe a little bit exhausted, and they've played a lot of games. It's understandable. It's not an excuse for them, possibly perform worse than Arsenal, because Arsenal are obviously in the same competitions as a Manchester City. And these teams who are in Europe regularly normally tend to deal with it well. So yeah, for me, I think it's just a poor run of results. And what I want to talk about most importantly with Liverpool is their next game. Obviously, we've got the international break now, which we've talked about. The Sunday the 19th, they play Manchester United at Anfield, and it feels like a massive game. It's one of the biggest games in the Premier League season. It's one that you always want to tune in for. Liverpool v Manchester United, a lot of history behind the game. Obviously, big rivalry as well. So this feels like a massive game for Liverpool's season, because they can obviously get right back on track. They can beat Manchester United, and depending on other results around them, that could move them back to the top of the table. And like I say, it could just after the break, it could give them that little boost to push on and again try and retain the Premier League title. As for Manchester United, they have started the season all right. I still stand by and say that they started the season all right. In their last game, they picked up a 2-0 victory against Sunderland at Old Trafford. So obviously, we mentioned about that in the previous episode, that obviously in regards to the managerial changes, and that Amorim was slightly, maybe under pressure because of the start of the season, and lots of Man United fans were unhappy. So that was a big game for him, massive victory, big 3 points, a clean sheet for Sani Lamens, who started his first game for the Red Devils. So I think there's possible sign of progression there, and I think Man United maybe could come into this game and want to cause an upset. We know historically, especially in the last few seasons, that Liverpool have had the upper hand on Manchester United. Man United did beat Liverpool in the FA Cup, the quarter-final, which was at Old Trafford. But their last victory against them in the league was also at Old Trafford. It was a 2-1 victory. It was right at the start of the 2022-23 season, where Liverpool failed to qualify for the Champions League. So there's obviously a clear difference between that Liverpool side and this one, playing a lot better. you can argue they're playing a lot better. They won the league last year, and this season they've started the season, they're in second place. They've picked up 5 wins from 7 games, but at the moment they're not on very good form. They've lost the last 3 in all competitions. So I think there's an opportunity for Manchester United to cause an upset. We've seen last season when Manchester City was struggling and Manchester City were on poor form around about Christmas time, I think it was. Like I say, it's November, December possibly. And Manchester United went to the Etihad and they beat them 2-1. So I totally think Manchester United could be in with a chance in this game. I know obviously lots of Man United fans may be a little bit pessimistic. Going to Anfield, it's obviously not a place where you've been getting many good results in the recent years, but overall in the league form, between Manchester United and Liverpool, Manchester United have the most wins. I think it's 69 to 62 wins, so 7 between them. Obviously Liverpool could close that to 6, or Man United could extend that to 8 and get their 70th win over Liverpool in the league. So I think it's a big game. I'm really excited. I just sort of can't wait for the international break to be over again so we can get back to the Premier League, because I think it's getting very interesting, and I always say after about between 8, 9, 10 games you can start to tell where teams are going to be in and around and finishing. It is obviously still a long season. You haven't played even a third of the season at that point, but I do think that you get a good gauge of what teams are performing well, what teams are, in and around the European places, who's struggling, could be, relegated, who's going to avoid the drop. So yeah, I think we're getting to that stage where we're going to start figuring out which teams are going to be competing for the title in Europe and so on. So that Man United Liverpool game at Anfield, Liverpool have to win that game in my opinion. I think, and not about Arne Slot isn't going to be sacked. I know lots of Liverpool fans maybe were jumping the gun after the recent defeat to Chelsea. I think it was obviously the substitutions and the changes that were happening in the game that was really getting to Liverpool fans. But Arne Slot is not going to be sacked. He's just won the league with Liverpool. He's got a lot of credit in the bank for doing that in his first Premier League season. But I mean that Liverpool have to win this in terms of confidence and trying to get back on track and really making a push to win the league title for back-to-back seasons. Because and I'll just say worst case scenario, if Liverpool were to lose that game and Arsenal were to win and Manchester City were to win and maybe it's even Bournemouth or Tottenham, Liverpool could be looking at being in 5th or 6th place. So it's a massive game, and the problem is with that, it doesn't sound like big, you've lost one game, that's fine, but they would have lost 4 in all competitions in a row. They would be sitting in, arguably 5th or 6th place, wherever it is. And for a player's mindset, that would seriously damage it and affect it. And it sort of changes the way that the team plays because of the low confidence and sort of the lack of self-belief in the game, really. I'm talking exactly what we've seen with Manchester City last year. They dropped, I think at some point they may have even been 7th or 8th, and they worked remarkably hard to pull back and get back into the Champions League places and end up finishing 3rd, but it was very close towards the end of the season. Remember, we had obviously Chelsea, Newcastle, Manchester City, Nottingham Forest were competing, Aston Villa were in and around there as well. They ended up finishing in the Europa League, so there was lots of teams and it was very tight because of that reason, because Manchester City had struggled for large periods in the middle of the season, and towards the end, they done what Manchester City do best and they regained their confidence and ended up plugging points together to end up finishing 3rd. So Liverpool need to avoid that from happening. They need to get a victory against Manchester City, and just for the simple fact of trying to keep up with Arsenal, essentially. Arsenal could lose as well, by the way. We know we're not writing that one off, but at the moment Arsenal are already ahead of Liverpool, so if both teams lost, Arsenal's still going to be above them and technically still going to have an advantage in the title race over Liverpool. So I think it is just a huge game overall, and I think Manchester United can go there with no pressure on them at all. I think there's very little expectation for them. All the pressure will be on Liverpool because of the recent form, obviously because Arsenal are really making a push for the league title and Liverpool have to try and keep up with them. So Man United can go there, no pressure at all. They managed to pick up a victory in their last game. The pressure has sort of slightly lifted off Ruben Amorim now, I imagine, And yeah, I think it's just going to be a very interesting encounter. I would be interested to see how Liverpool line up, because I personally think they should start with Ekitike. We've seen at the start of the season he was really good, on really good form, and he made a silly error against Southampton really to get that red card. Just a little bit of immaturity, lack of experience. He was on a yellow card. He took his top off to celebrate. Second yellow card, and he was sent off. And obviously that ruled him out of the Crystal Palace game, I believe. So yeah, for me, I just think you've got to maybe put that silliness to the side, but you've got to start him because his form on the pitch was sensational. 3 goals for him so far this season. I mean, if we didn't have Erling Haaland in the league, we would probably be seeing that 3 goals so far. 4 goals, 5 goals would be, a silly amount to have at this stage of the season. But obviously, it's just the expectations that have been set by the Norwegians. So for me, Ekitike is warranting a start, and I don't think that you should shoehorn Ekitike out to the left to replace Gakpo. I think you have to play him where he's been playing, and that's at the number 9 position, and that's where he's been performing his best levels. So for me, Ekitike would have to start, and it's nothing against Alexander Isak, because I think, as we've mentioned before, I think he's a phenomenal footballer, and he's shown time and time again for Newcastle that he can play at the highest level, and he can reach unimaginable highs as a player. Obviously his aspirations for joining Liverpool was to win the Premier League and the Champions League and all of the big trophies, and I definitely think that is a possibility, possibly even this season. But I just think that obviously Liverpool need to figure themselves out again. They need to find their identity that they had last year, and yeah, they need to just pick up some points, start picking up points consistently like they were in the opening 5 games of the season, because although they didn't play particularly well, they won all 5, so, and it was tight games. I think they won almost every game by 1 goal. The Bournemouth game was the only one that they won by 2 goal deficit. They beat them 4-2. So, I think it's just about having, maybe like Karga says, that little bit of control on the pitch, and obviously just figuring your way again. But I have no doubts that Liverpool are going to be in and around the top spots come the end of the season. In me, I think they've got a phenomenal squad. Both them and Arsenal and Manchester City have possibly the biggest squads in the league and the most quality squads in the league as well. So it's no surprise to see them performing the way that they are. And yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if them were the top 3 teams come the end of the season. But I think that's going to round it off for today's episode. We've covered quite a lot of bases there. Obviously talking about Bournemouth, Haaland and Liverpool, and obviously a little mention of Manchester United as well, because I think sometimes they do need a little bit of credit. I know not everyone likes to give it to them, but I don't think they're doing too bad. They're sitting in 10th place, and you can only build from there really. I don't think they'll go back down. So yeah, poor season last season, but fairly decent start, I think, fairly consistent anyway. So yeah, I think that's where we're going to round it off. You let me know your thoughts below on the topics we've discussed today. Bournemouth start the season. Haaland, is he a freak of nature? Is something that we've maybe never seen before in the Premier League? Well, maybe not for a very long time. And obviously Liverpool and their recent form. What would you put it down to? Any Liverpool fans that may be watching the videos? Why do you think that maybe you haven't been picking up the points that you should have done in the last few games? Or why do you think the performances at the start of the season were not necessarily up to speed, but you were picking up the points? Let me know below. But yeah, we're going to round it off there. Like I say, I'm going to try and come out with another one next week, but obviously it is a national break, so I'm not too sure what type of content we'll be able to put out. Leave it with me, and I'll obviously have to try and see if I can think of some more ideas. Maybe we'll do an England podcast, episode 1. But no, we'll have to see about that. So yeah, thanks very much for watching. Please do leave a like on the video, and please subscribe as well. And I'll catch you in the next video.